The information provided in this podcast episode is for entertainment purposes and is not medical advice. If you have any questions about your health, contact a medical professional. This content is strictly the opinions of Lucas Owen and is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The references, claims, and scientific information linked to any products are only applicable to those listeners who are based in the US. If you are outside the US, this information does not apply to you. It is not intended to provide medical advice or to take the place of medical advice or treatment from a personal physician. All viewers of this content are advised to consult with their doctors or qualified health professionals regarding specific health questions. Thank you for listening to the Boost Your Biology podcast. My name is Lucas Owen. I uncover the most cutting edge health information on the planet, ranging from hormones, nutrition, supplementation, fat loss, biohacking, longevity, wellness, and a whole lot more. Welcome to the Boost Your Biology podcast.
Lucas, what's up, man? Nice to finally meet you again.
Hey, Dustin. Yeah, great to be here. I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, I've just been meaning to catch up with you. I mean, your content has been great. What you've contributed to the biohacking space has been great, especially with where NNB's interests lie. And so that's the reason why I wanted to catch up with you and talk to you about this topic. But, getting a bit more into your background, I was at a great biohacking conference recently, was introduced to some of the top players in the game. Of course, didn't get a chance to get an introduction to you and your background. So really curious as to how you yourself got into the biohacking space.
Yeah, so my journey really started out as actually trying to become a professional soccer player. So when I was a young boy, I was always interested in ways to optimize my performance on the soccer field. And then from there, I started sort of like dabbling and experimenting with different supplements, as you do as a young guy looking for a competitive edge. Started out with like creatine, beta-alanine, the whey protein, just the basic supplements. And then from there, Dustin, I started like getting interested in the field of like nootropics, which are, cognitive enhancers. You'd know quite a lot about those. And then as I was studying exercise science, I was like, hang on a second, I'm spending most of my time researching like supplements and nutrition and everything related to what is known as naturopathy. So from that exercise science degree, I then decided to enroll into a naturopathy degree. And I completed a 4-year naturopathy, Bachelor of Health Science naturopathy degree. And then that sort of like led to creating an enormous amount of content on, this entire field of biohacking and human optimization. So yeah, my journey's been a pretty fascinating one, and I really love what I do, and my work doesn't really feel like work at all.
Yeah, the naturopathy degree, I'm actually not too familiar with. I was an exercise science major myself. What does that degree incorporate?
Yeah, so to be a naturopath in Australia, so it's a Bachelor of Health Science. So what we do is we understand, we cover like, nutritional biochemistry. We look at how herbs affect the body, how to prescribe herbs, how to, properly prescribe certain supplements and vitamins. So it's like a combination of a nutrition degree plus like herbal medicine applications as well.
That's actually really cool. And I wish they had that in school, getting so deep into the supplement space. I would have been all over that. I was working at a nutrition store while I was going for that exercise science degree. And I wish they just had incorporated supplements more. So that's really cool. I mean, one of the reasons why I sort of wanted to tackle, some of these subjects like anti-aging and supplementation with you is now that I'm working with NNB Nutrition. I mean, this company has been great. I mean, they literally will dissect ingredients, find out what the actives are in the blood, and they will make advancements into human nutrition by finding the most bioavailable forms of ingredients, the most concentrated forms of ingredients. And it's been amazing just working with them. And that's one of the reasons why they've gotten so big and gotten so involved in the biohacking space when it comes to, you talked about how you studied in herbs and extracts and how they interact with the body. What they're doing here is they're finding out what the body's converting it into in the blood, what those actives are, and they're concentrating those and making pure forms of those. So I really feel like there's going to be this merger going forward in the future between NMB and biohacking, which is why I wanted to talk to you, because a big area of interest for us now is anti-aging. I mean, it's a big area of interest for the industry. So, you being a biohacker, I was curious, where do you see the anti-aging market sort of like headed in terms of like ingredients, techniques? How do you see things there?
Yeah, it's a great question around like the future of that sort of anti-aging longevity space. I think it's quite obvious that you've got people like Brian Johnson, who's like pioneering the peak of biohacking at the moment, which is like he's running all sorts of experiments. And I think what's really trending at the moment is focusing on mitochondrial function. I believe that a number of people are really starting to actually understand the importance of mitochondrial function, which is, the powerhouse of our cells. And I believe that one part of aging is definitely related to that aspect of biological, signaling and pathways. I think like the efficiency of one's mitochondria really determines how fast they're aging, alongside other different factors there. So I'd say modalities such as, ice baths, saunas, NMN, creatine, coenzyme Q10, D-ribose, like all of these mitochondrial enhancers, I think are really starting to like pop off. And it's fortunate because, it's a perfect time for, star ingredients like, L-ergothioneine as MITOPRIME as a really, powerful way to support mitochondrial function. And I think there's going to be more and more, products on the market that contain this unique ingredient, perhaps on its own or in a blend with other ingredients as a unique way to support energy production and potentially slow down aging.
Yeah, I can see those things being huge. We were always taught with the exercise science how it's the powerhouse of the cell and it affects so many things. And that's why so many ingredients are targeting it now. So, a couple of things you mentioned there were really huge. The MitoPrime in particular, which we're actually making in-house. So, I guess for those watching, do you have like an overview of ergothioneine that you could sort of give the viewers?
Yeah, so L-ergothioneine or L-ergothioneine is a pretty robust and powerful antioxidant. Now, what's unique about it is that it's actually a natural amino acid, and it has some pretty interesting properties that I think a number of people will be, quite surprised by. Now, ergothioneine can actually be found in the human body, and it's actually found within, erythrocytes, within the eyes, semen, and even the skin. And what's extremely fascinating about L-ergothioneine is that the human body actually has a unique and specific ergothioneine transporter and storage system to use when defense is needed. So it just goes to show that ergothioneine has some pretty serious properties, and I guess its energy boosting antioxidant properties makes it a very powerful ingredient to consider for various supplements.
Yeah, I mean, some of the health benefits associated with it, like the cellular and DNA protection, the longevity, that type of stuff, that definitely makes it really, really interesting, especially when you consider that it's found in the human body in so many places. Like in my experience, when you think about ingredients like creatine, citrulline, the fact that it's found in the human body and being able to support the body's production of it, that's typically huge for how it can affect us. I mean, as you've sort of been looking at it, was there anything else that you found interesting? I think I came across some stuff outside of the mitochondrial function, sort of like the antioxidant activity. I'm wondering if you saw anything there, or like I think I saw comparisons to like vitamin C, glutathione.
Yeah. What's really profound about ergothioneine is that it's In one particular study, it demonstrated that it was 34 times more effective than glutathione. And now most people listening to this podcast probably take glutathione as a daily antioxidant to regenerate the liver, to detoxify the body, and it also has a very long half-life. So it has a 32-day half-life compared to 8 minutes, which is what glutathione is, only 8-minute half-life. So in terms of its, robust and long-lasting effect, means that it's actually outperforming glutathione in both of those areas. And then if we looked at some of the other studies associated with its antioxidant properties, it appears that this particular type of antioxidant is unique and that it was actually the oxygen radical absorption capacity, which is ORAC score. It's an ORAC score. It's a measure of antioxidant potency, was actually 191% higher than that of PQQ. Now, PQQ is yet another, probably I'd say, trending supplement, Justin. Yeah, it's a very powerful, brain nutrient. So, its ability to outperform that is, quite impressive.
Yeah. So we talked about antioxidant activity, the mitochondrial health. I mean, what do you think would be, I guess if you could summarize all that, what would you think would be like the primary health benefits? Like if somebody was taking ergothioneine, what are the primary things that they should be taking it for overall?
Yeah, I definitely think number one would be general energy and well-being. So optimizing general baseline energy so that, day to day, how much I guess like battery you have in your battery pack. I would also say immune health as well, because, ergothioneine as a, powerful antioxidant is going to help with, preventing, the typical colds and flus, potentially helping in that regard. And then interestingly, I'd say from an exercise performance perspective, there might be some potential applications there to reduce the likelihood of, potentially suffering from like burnout or like just overtraining, because it's, regenerating the body and protecting the body from, oxidative stress.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, the reason why I asked too is, sometimes me being on sort of like the branding side of the industry, you get so deep into mechanism of action and people are just sort of like, well, okay, well, what it'll actually like do for me? It's like all this stuff is like really cool, the mechanisms, what it'll actually do for me. So, what you mentioned was huge. I mean, immune function was huge during the pandemic, right? We talked about glutathione. A bunch of people were taking NAC during the pandemic to increase glutathione production. So I think that's a good one to mention because so many more people are familiar with that as a result of the pandemic and the attention to the immune system. And then really the big one for me is energy, right? That's like the number one need state. Caffeine's like the number one non-protein ingredient in the industry. So yeah, those two are really interesting to me. And I'm glad you were able to sort of summarize that for me and everyone else, because mechanism of action is cool, but then it's like, all right, when I take it, what does it actually do for me? You also, one thing I wanted to touch on, you mentioned some research studies, maybe you already mentioned your favorites with the antioxidant study, but were there any other studies that you came across that were floating around that you might have been really impressed with?
Yeah, actually, one that I'm really fascinated by is the fact that what happens when we combine, MITOPRIME or ergothioneine with daily exercise, potentially offsetting obesity, based upon some of the studies looking at how it affects serum triglyceride content and also serum HDL. So what they found was that the serum triglyceride content actually decreased, whilst serum HDL, which is the good cholesterol, actually increased after taking MITOPRIME, regardless of combined exercise. So at least in that study there, they're looking at how it can potentially help with lipid management or cholesterol parameters. That's an important pathway because there's a number of drugs on the market that are designed to lower cholesterol, or lower triglycerides. But a lot of these drugs have pretty nasty side effects. So if we can sort of manage or modulate cholesterol parameters with ergothioneine, that's a big plus as well.
Nice. Yeah, that would be huge. I mean, so many people that I know, like family members, when they get older, right? It's like they start getting on the triglyceride related medication, whether it be for their cholesterol or something else. Huge issue for Americans, especially too. So that could be huge. I mean, I can tell you, obviously, being part of the company, we've worked with it. I can tell you my favorite study. It was a simple one. It was actually came out in like the Journal of Nutritional Science. Really, really simple chart. It showed countries like Italy, Ireland, France. Their life expectancies were like 80 plus years old on one end of the chart. And then the other end of the chart, a life expectancy below 80 years old was the US, right? I mean, we're like number one industrial country in the world, and we don't have a life expectancy like some of these smaller, GDP European countries. And then, the US is down here. You've got Italy and France, they're up here. And people are always talking about, oh, in Europe, the wine, the food, it's less processed food, all those other things. But just to sort of add insult to injury, on this chart, the other axis of the chart was showing the amount of ergothioneine that was consumed in the diet, the daily diet. And so it was like the more ergothioneine that a country consumed, the longer their life expectancy was, up and up on the chart as you went from left to right. And so I thought that was interesting because you hear every day about a different reason as to why the life expectancy here in the US is lower. And now we can add, ergothioneine to that list. I saw that it was coined as the longevity vitamin by a few people, just because of its association with life expectancy. So I thought that was huge, and that was a crazy one that I really loved.
And it wouldn't surprise me, Dustin, that if in like maybe 2 to 3 years from now, it's like widely regarded as the premier, longevity vitamin. A lot of attention's been focused on, vitamin D in the context of immune health, but and also maybe like vitamin C as well. But I think there's going to be more and more attention being drawn towards ergothione's unique applications, and we're seeing here that it's potentially associated with longevity and anti-aging. So it's an exciting space to operate in, and it's fun because we get to look into these at face value and get to look at them and understand them in greater detail.
Yeah, it should be really cool. Even by like definition of the vitamin, it's based on like need, external need for your body. So if they're finding that we have it less and less in our diet, that sort of like opens up the way to supplementation. Um, I'm not sure what supplements you've sort of seen on the market yet for ergothioneine, but any suggestions as to what people should look for?
Yeah, so I guess from a supplementation perspective and practical application, so if somebody's listening to this podcast and wants to know, how can I actually utilize it? What sort of dosages should I be aiming for? Well, with ergothioneine, what's really profound is that the recommended dosage is actually very low. It's actually sort of sits between 5 to 15 milligrams per serving. And that can be done once or twice a day. Obviously, it has a very, very good safety profile from a LD50 or toxicity perspective. But I think if we're looking at dosages, 5 to 15 milligrams per serving, you can go up to like 30 to 50 milligrams. And in terms of time of day, well, I would say it can be quite flexible in that regard. Doesn't need to be taken, first thing in the morning. It doesn't need to be before bed. I think individuals can gauge how they best respond by just being, flexible with timing and dosages.
Got you. Yeah, and sort of kind of continuing on with the thought you sort of started there. I mean, just on my side, from an N&B perspective, since we make it for a bunch of different companies, a bunch of different brands, some things that I could tell people is, it's been on the market for a while, actually. I was surprised, when I started to discover it, how long it's been around, but it was just so expensive to make, even at that low dose. So one of the interesting things is now that we make it in-house, we've had this huge opportunity for brands where they can get it at like half the cost of what it was years ago. So um, if it's going to become as popular, as you say it is, being coined the longevity vitamin, I wouldn't be surprised to see more brands sort of picking it up, utilizing it now that the cost is so much lower. Um, Another thing that I always warn people about, when it comes to branded ingredients is there's been so many testing issues in this industry. I'm sure you've probably seen it in Australia where like Now Foods, other third-party labs are testing a bunch of products on the market. They're not testing out. And this sort of like lends credibility to, branded ingredients to companies like ours that can make these ingredients in-house because of these testing issues. And because we're making it in-house, from a quality standpoint, it's fermented. We're doing it through fermentation. We're not pulling it. You mentioned earlier that it was found in, the flesh of animals and humans, and we're doing more of a natural fermentation process, which I think is huge. But of course, I got to ask because people are going to wonder how they can get it in their diet. I alluded to it earlier how you had certain countries that were eating certain foods, and because of their diet and what they were eating, they had larger amounts of ergothioneine and they were living longer. So even outside of the supplements, because I sort of brought up that study, I'm sure people are wondering, how can we get it? What should we be eating? I wonder if you had any recommendations there.
Yeah, great question, Dustin. So from a dietary perspective, funnily enough, actually, ergothioneine is actually naturally occurring in mushrooms, organ meats, black and red beans, also oat bran, and then even garlic. So a lot of these different foods actually contain, very small amounts of ergothioneines, which goes to show you that, I mean, Mother Nature is so intelligent. It's packed these foods, which already have a lot of other health benefits outside of just the fact that they contain ergothioneine. A lot of these foods actually have, all these other nutrients and vitamins and probably other compounds that we don't even understand or know. But it just goes to show you that these are some good food sources.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting how random some of those food sources were. Like usually it's like, hey, you get this type of vitamin from greens, you get this type of vitamin from meat. Ergothenium is like all over the place, but I will say from what you mentioned, it does kind of remind me of like that Mediterranean diet, like with the mushrooms and the meats and the beans. And you always hear about the Mediterranean diet being a top one for longevity. I mentioned some Mediterranean countries earlier having longer life expectancies than us. So it's sort of putting the pieces to the puzzle together in my head about why some people are living longer, based on what they're eating and based on what they're doing. So that's good info. That's interesting. Um, but in our industry, I'm thinking back to how we sort of opened up. We talked about the anti-aging industry in general and longevity, and pharmaceutical companies have been coming after certain ingredients, right? They've been coming after NMN in particular. We've got one company that's currently conducting research with NMN and trying to convince the FDA to essentially get people to stop reselling it. So I was wondering, were you familiar with any cosmetic or pharmaceutical use for ergothioneine? I think I've seen some stuff like with skincare. Wasn't sure if there was anything else going on in like the cosmetic or pharmaceutical industry that you might have heard.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, they're looking at how ergothionene's potential applications against UV-induced oxidative stress. So, looking at how it can actually potentially be applied as a topical, also topical cream, potentially as a way to defend against free radical damage from the sun. Potentially here we may be seeing applications for sunscreen as like potentially an ingredient in sunscreen formulations. But I guess the UV, it makes sense that it has UV protective qualities, just like we see with glutathione, just like we see with vitamin C. So I think that's an interesting pathway as well.
So, I mean, it's kind of like stacking on the benefits at this point, not only ingestible but topical as well, and then protecting you from UV. You always hear about people warning about skin cancer and sunspots and how too much sun can work against you. So that's interesting. I'm really hoping that the pharmaceutical industry doesn't work against us in that regard with some of that cool research sort of coming out. And hopefully, when these research studies keep rolling out, that gives us a nice alternative to NMN, but maybe not even alternative. I would say maybe like an adjacent ingredient to promote longevity to NMN. So that's really cool to hear. I mean, kind of thinking forward in that regard, do you anticipate any trends that may be coming on? I think we talked about like the longevity vitamin earlier. Um, how do you feel like the biohacking community might sort of respond to some of these revelations coming out with ergothioneine?
Yeah, I think I mean we're always on the hunt and always on the lookout for new and novel ingredients. Like that's what we just love doing. Like a lot of the clients that I work with one on one, like they say to me, they're like, Lucas, like what do you have that's, what's the next best thing? And I'm like, oh, check out ergothioneine, check out paraxanthine, check out all these different ingredients. So I'd say what's going to happen is over time, over the next couple of years, you'll see the big brands like, potentially like Thorne, Jarrows, Now Foods, like all these big brands, wanting to incorporate, MITOPRIME or ergothioneine as part of their, formulations as a potential ingredient. They're going to see celebrities, wanting to use this as part of potentially their energy drinks. This is, or even their own pre-workouts, or general like daily multivitamin. So I think the trends are, looking promising because again, the consumer market is always hungry for more, or always hungry for something new and unique. Like they want to try stuff that's unique. Maybe they get bored of their current stack and their current protocol and they want to just throw in something new to try out. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting space to keep an eye on.
Yeah. One of the things I like about it is the really low dosage. So you mentioned some of the trends that could be coming. I mean, this could be thrown into an energy drink, pre-workout, like you said. NMB is doing something along those lines. There's a growing demand for mushrooms that's growing in popularity because they're antioxidant, immune support, cognitive, support systems. And because of the low dose of ergothioneine, and because we're able to make it in house for the low cost, we threw it in a blend called Myco Boost, which is a blend of mushrooms. We also did sort of like a greens blend and a reds blend, a concentrated blend that could be used in a bunch of different products. And we put the ergothioneine in there as well. So I thought it was interesting that because we got it to such a small dose and such a low cost, and because the way that we're supposed to eat as humans, it's supposed to be in abundance in our diet to promote longevity. We're throwing it into mushrooms, greens that brands can use to sort of really enhance their formulas. So when I saw NNB doing that, I thought that was really cool. Wasn't sure if it was, overkill. It's like, why are you just sort of putting it in everything? But after this conversation with you, seeing that it's in the American diet in abundance, coming across studies on my own, seeing how the more people consume it, the longer they live, it sort of makes sense. If we're going to be making these whole food ingredients for brands to use, this is something we can do to enhance the antioxidant power of these ingredients and enhance the longevity power of these ingredients. So that's really cool in terms of future prospects with it. I guess for the most part, I mean, is there anything, you usually do these on YouTube, I imagine. Maybe there should be some questions people should sort of like ask you in the comments when this is all said and done. Is that something that you normally do? Like, I guess, respond to some of the questions after the fact?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like anyone listening to the podcast or video here, feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions about this particular ingredient. If you have questions around, its potential applications, or perhaps you want to gain access to the clinical trials or PDF sheets, we've got those handy. So feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we have the sales data, not the sales data, sorry, but like the actual research data on ergothioneine. So yeah, if you ever have any listeners that have any like additional questions or whatever, feel free to reach out to me or NMB. We can provide you with additional info we've come across since we're making it in house. That way, you can let your listeners know, answer some of the questions that they might have. Yeah, so I mean, it's been you know, always learning a little bit from anybody in the biohacker community whenever I talk to them. So it's always great to be able to sort of like to chat with you. I mean, for me, what I gather from you, some of the key takeaways is how ergothioneine really relates to longevity, finding the right foods to consume it, finding the right supplements to consume it, and some of the really interesting research on the mechanisms of action. I mean, by the way you describe it, this is a really, really powerful ingredient. When you first came across it, I guess what was your first impression of it?
Yeah, when I first came across it would have been probably 2.5 years ago. My mentor, Sean Wells, sort of brought it to my attention. And yeah, I was immediately captivated by its, robust antioxidant effects. And I knew that in, 3 to 5 years time, people will want, there's going to be a big demand for a very low dose antioxidant that can either match or outperform glutathione. And I was like, okay, this is serious. Like the body has a dedicated transporter for this particular ingredient. So it's like it must be important. It must be an important application or pathway. So this is definitely something for people to, I guess, keep your eye out for. If this is the first time that people are, watching this podcast or this video, if this is the first time you've heard about this ingredient, flag it, bookmark it, do what you need to do, because this is going to be, really, really cutting edge in the next couple of years.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and if any of your listeners are looking for immediate info, I mean, we've got some information up on our website too, listed under MITOPRIME. But definitely, I would say ask Lucas, the questions, and he's the man to answer it, and we can provide the information. So that would be great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it was a pleasure chatting as always, Dustin. I'm looking forward to the next ingredient that we chat about. But yeah, I'm sure my audience will have found this extremely valuable, and I'm sure they're going to be going out to hunt down some MitoPrime for themselves after listening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we make the stuff and we provide the education, and then it's up to the brands to capitalize on the trends. So definitely great chatting with you, and thank you for all the info. Much appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks, Dustin.
All right, till next time. Thanks, Lucas.
See ya.